How did you discover your identical twin was living your life in another city? It started with small things that I brushed off as coincidences. A barista at a coffee shop I'd never visited before greeting me by name and asking about my usual order. A woman at the grocery store asking how my art classes were going when I'd never taken an art class in my life. A man at the gas station thanking me for the amazing dinner last week when I was certain we'd never met. At first, I thought these people were just confusing me with someone else. I have one of those faces, I told myself. It happens to everyone sometimes. But the incidents kept happening with increasing frequency. A postal worker asked why I'd changed my address without filing the proper paperwork. A librarian reminded me that my book was overdue when I hadn't checked out any books. A restaurant hostess seated me at my usual table at a place I'd never set foot in before. You must have a doppelganger somewhere, my best friend Maya said when I told her about the latest case of mistaken identity. Someone who looks exactly like you. I laughed it off, but privately I was starting to feel unsettled. The encounters were becoming too frequent and too specific to be simple cases of mistaken identity. The breaking point came when I was visiting my grandmother in the hospital. As I walked through the cardiac wing, a nurse stopped me in the hallway. "Sarah, I'm so glad you came back," she said warmly. "Your grandmother has been asking about you all morning. She was so worried when you left crying yesterday." I stared at her in confusion. "I'm sorry, but I think you have me confused with someone else. I haven't been here since last week, and my grandmother is in the oncology wing, not cardiac." The nurse looked puzzled. "But you were here yesterday visiting Mrs. Patterson in room 304. You were wearing that same blue sweater." "Mrs. Patterson isn't my grandmother, and I wasn't wearing this sweater yesterday." The nurse studied my face carefully, her confusion deepening. "I could have sworn, you look exactly like her. Even your voice is the same." After she walked away, I stood in that hospital corridor feeling like the ground was shifting beneath my feet. This wasn't just someone who resembled me, this was someone who apparently looked and sounded identical to me. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about all the strange encounters over the past few months. The barista who knew my usual order. The librarian with my overdue book. The nurse who was certain she'd seen me yesterday. What if they weren't cases of mistaken identity? What if there really was someone out there who looked exactly like me? The next morning, I called my mom and asked a question that had been nagging at me since the hospital incident. "Mom, was I adopted?" There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "Why would you ask that? Just answer the question. Was I adopted?" "No, honey, you're my biological daughter. Why are you asking?" I explained about the strange encounters and my growing suspicion that someone who looked exactly like me was living somewhere nearby. "That's ridiculous," my mother said, but her voice sounded strained. "People get confused all the time. You're reading too much into this." But something about her tone didn't sit right with me. She sounded nervous, almost defensive. Over the next few days, I started paying closer attention to these encounters. Instead of just correcting people and walking away, I began asking questions. The barista who knew my usual order told me I came in every Tuesday and Thursday morning for a large oat milk latte with an extra shot of espresso. She said I was always friendly and usually mentioned my graphic design work. I was a graphic designer, but I'd never been to that coffee shop, and I hated oat milk. The librarian showed me the overdue book supposedly checked out under my name. It was a biography of Georgia O'Keeffe, and the signature on the checkout card looked exactly like my handwriting. "You were so excited about this book," the librarian said. "You told me you were thinking about switching from graphic design to fine art." I'd never considered switching careers, but the signature was unmistakably mine. The restaurant hostess walked me to a corner table and mentioned that I usually came in on Friday nights with a tall man with dark hair. She described him as charming and said we seemed very much in love. I hadn't been on a date in 6 months. Each piece of information painted a picture of someone living a life that was similar to mine but different in key ways. Someone who shared my appearance, my handwriting, even my voice, but who had made different choices about coffee preferences, career paths, and romantic relationships. Full story on channel link below.